In the year 52 BCE, as Julius Caesar's legions prepared for what would become the most decisive battle in Gaul, a single bark echoed across the Roman camp, a sound that would help determine the fate of an empire. But this wasn't just any dog. This was Ferox, a Molossian warhound whose loyalty would prove more valuable than 1,000 swords, and whose story history almost forgot entirely. What if I told you that one of Rome's greatest military victories wasn't won by strategy alone, but by the unwavering courage of a four-legged soldier whose name should be remembered alongside the greatest generals of antiquity? The morning mist clung to the hills surrounding Alesia like a shroud, and in the Roman camp below, 50,000 legionaries prepared for siege warfare unlike anything they had ever attempted. It was September of 52 BCE, and Julius Caesar faced his greatest challenge yet, the united tribes of Gaul under the brilliant leadership of Vercingetorix had fortified themselves in what seemed an impregnable hilltop fortress. But Caesar had more than just his legendary tactical genius and discipline. Legions, hidden among the baggage trains, the supply wagons, and the auxiliary troops, moved creatures that most historians have overlooked entirely: the dogs of war. These weren't mere camp followers or hunting companions. They were Molossian hounds, descendants of the legendary war dogs that had served Alexander the Great, bred for one purpose: to be weapons in the hands of Rome. Among these formidable beasts was Ferox, a massive male whose scarred muzzle and intelligent amber eyes spoke of battles already fought and won. He belonged to Marcus Atticus, a young optio, a junior officer in the 10th Legion, Caesar's most trusted unit. But their bond transcended the typical relationship between soldier and beast. In the unforgiving world of Roman conquest, where death lurked behind every hill and in every forest, Ferox had become something more precious than gold: a guardian, a scout, and perhaps most importantly, a reminder of the humanity the war so often tried to steal away. As the siege of Alesia began, neither Marcus nor the watching world could have imagined the dog's instincts would help write one of history's most famous chapters. Marcus Atticus had found Ferox 3 years earlier, not in some Roman breeding kennel, but in the smoking ruins of a Helvetii village during Caesar's first major campaign in Gaul. The puppy, barely old enough to open his eyes, lay whimpering beside his mother's still form, the only survivor of a battle that had claimed an entire settlement. Something in the young soldier's heart cracked at the sight. Perhaps it was homesickness, or maybe just a recognition of another soul caught in the machinery of empire. But Marcus wrapped the tiny creature in his cloak and carried him back to camp. The other legionaries mocked him at first. Atticus and his Wolf cub, they called them, laughing at the sight of the stern young optio sharing his rations with a growing ball of fur. But their laughter died when Ferox began to show what Molossian blood truly meant. By his first winter, he stood 3 feet at the shoulder, his muscles rippling beneath a coat of iron-gray fur. More importantly, his intelligence became legendary throughout the 10th Legion. Ferox seemed to understand warfare with an intuition that amazed even veteran centurions. During night watches, he could detect enemy scouts hours before human sentries caught wind of them. In the dense forests of Gaul, where Celtic warriors could appear like ghosts from behind any tree, Ferox's nose and ears became Marcus's lifeline. The dog developed an uncanny ability to sense ambush, his hackles rising and his body tensing in warning long before danger revealed itself. But it was during the siege of Gergovia, Caesar's first major defeat, that Ferox truly proved his worth. As Roman forces retreated under heavy Celtic assault, Marcus found himself separated from his century, wounded and surrounded by enemy warriors in the twisting streets of the hilltop town. 3 Gallic fighters closed in, their long swords gleaming. In the afternoon sun, victory cries on their lips. That was when Ferox became a legend. the massive hound erupted from behind, a stone wall like a fury from the underworld. His 120 pounds of muscle and bone struck the first warrior with the force of a battering ram, sending the man sprawling. Before the others could react, Ferox's jaws clamped down on a second warrior's sword arm, the bone-crushing force of his bite making the man scream and drop his weapon. The third Gaul turned to flee, but Marcus, given precious seconds by his companion's intervention, managed to rally and strike down his remaining opponents. That night, as the Roman army licked its wounds from the failed assault, word of the war dog's heroics spread through every campfire. Ferox became more than Marcus's companion. He became a symbol of Roman resilience, proof that victory could be snatched from defeat by courage and loyalty. Now, a year later, as the siege of Alesia entered its most critical phase, those qualities would be tested beyond anything they had yet faced. Caesar's bold strategy was unprecedented. Rather than simply besieging the Gallic fortress, he had ordered his legions to build a second set of fortifications facing outward, creating a double siege. The Romans would simultaneously blockade Vercingetorix's forces inside Alesia while protecting themselves from a massive relief army that everyone knew was coming. The engineering marvel took weeks to complete. 11 miles of inner fortifications to contain the Gauls, and 30 miles of outer walls to protect the Romans from attack by the relief force. Between these two rings of wood and stone, Caesar's 50,000 legionaries waited, surrounded by enemies on both sides. It was during the construction of these fortifications that Ferox made a discovery that would change everything. While patrolling with Marcus along the outer perimeter one fog-shrouded dawn, the dog suddenly halted, his entire body rigid with attention. His nose worked the air frantically before he began moving in a specific direction, following some scent. Trail invisible to human senses, Marcus trusted his companion's instincts completely by now. Following Ferox through the morning mist, they discovered something that made Marcus's blood run cold. Hidden paths through the supposedly impassable marshland to the west of the Roman position. Footprints in the mud, barely visible in the pre-dawn darkness, showed that Gallic scouts had been using these secret routes to observe Roman movements and potentially plan a surprise attack. Racing back to report this intelligence, Marcus and Ferox had uncovered what military historians would later recognize as one of the most crucial pieces of battlefield intelligence in ancient warfare. Caesar immediately ordered additional fortifications built to cover these hidden approaches, a decision that would prove vital in the days to come. When the massive Gallic relief army finally arrived, some sources claim it numbered over a quarter of 1,000,000 warriors. They launched their attack exactly as Ferox had predicted. The secret marsh paths became a key component of their assault plan, with thousands of Celtic warriors attempting to use the hidden routes to strike at what they believed was an undefended Roman flank. But Caesar was ready. As the sun rose over Alesia on what would become the battle's climactic day, Roman Scorpion artillery and archery units, positioned along the reinforced western fortifications, unleashed devastating volleys into the marshland. What should have been a surprise attack became a slaughter, with Celtic warriors trapped in the muddy approaches with nowhere to retreat. The tide of the entire siege turned in those crucial hours. Inside Alesia, Vercingetorix watched in horror as his relief army was systematically destroyed by Roman military engineering and discipline. By afternoon, the greatest chieftain in Gallic history would surrender himself to Caesar to save the lives of his people, and the conquest of Gaul would be complete. That evening, as the Roman legions celebrated their victory with wine and songs that would echo through the centuries, Marcus sat quietly beside his tent, running his fingers through Ferox's thick fur. The war dog bore new scars from the day's fighting, claw marks from a Celtic warhound, a shallow sword cut along his flank, but his amber eyes still held that steady intelligence that had saved so many Roman lives. Caesar himself, making his rounds through the camp as was his custom after major victories, paused when he spotted the pair. The great general, whose own commentaries on the Gallic wars would become immortal literature, knelt down and extended his hand to Ferox. The dog, sensing something significant in the moment, allowed the conqueror of Gaul to stroke his scarred muzzle. This hound has served Rome as faithfully as any centurion, Caesar declared, his voice carrying to the gathered legionaries. Let it be recorded that Ferox of the 10th Legion helped secure our victory at Alesia. It was the only time in his extensive military writings that Caesar would mention an individual animal by name, a testament to the dog's extraordinary contribution to Roman conquest. But history, as it often does, forgot the four-legged heroes. Caesar's commentaries focused on strategy and politics, not on the loyal beasts who bled alongside the legions. When poets like Virgil later celebrated Roman glory, they sang of eagles and standards, not of war dogs who saved lives in marshy dawns. The name Ferox vanished from the historical record, remembered only in a few scattered military documents that would crumble into dust over the centuries. Marcus and Ferox would serve together for 5 more years, through Caesar's invasion of Britain and the civil wars that followed. When the old soldier finally retired to a small farm outside Rome, Ferox went with him, spending his final years chasing rabbits through Italian olive groves instead of Celtic warriors through Gallic forests. He died peacefully on a warm summer afternoon in 45 BCE, his head resting on Marcus's lap, surrounded by children who had grown up on stories of his legendary courage. Today, nearly 2,000 years later, we remember Julius Caesar as one of history's greatest military minds. We study his tactics, quote his writings, and name months after him. But we've forgotten that some of his most crucial victories were won not just by human genius, but by the loyalty, courage, and instincts of creatures who asked for nothing more than the chance to serve alongside the people they loved. In the end, perhaps that's the most Roman story of all, not just the triumph of empire, but the bonds of loyalty that made such triumphs possible. Ferox may not have monuments or statues, but his story reminds us that heroism comes in many forms, and that sometimes the most faithful soldiers are the ones who never sought glory for themselves, only the safety of those they served. In the misty marshlands around Alesia, if you know how to listen, you can still hear echoes of that ancient bark that helped change the world.